Hello, my name is Marcel Mike. My special assignment is on nephrology population, which is the end stage renal disease population, also known as kidney disease or kidney failure, which deals with kidney transplants and dialysis. This was a important part of why I chose this population because my father-in-law died from this with a complication of diabetes as well as my wife having polycystic kidney disease. So I'm going to be exploring with you the stages of nephrology and what a nephrology social worker should do from my research from the articles and from the readings of Sarah Gelhart. How is social work? How is working with this specialty population different from others? I think the first thing that we have to do is define what ESRD, which is end-stage renal disease, which is also known as kidney failure or lack of kidney functioning. According to the Gelhart readings, she describes it as it's a chronic illness that results in kidney failure and necessitates renal replacement therapy via dialysis or kidney transplant. Which is something that not a lot of the other populations have to deal with as far as transplants and going through dialysis, which is basically the manual version of waste management for your body, which is removing byproducts and waste. Oftentimes 2 to 3 times a week. Some people do it through the hemodialysis, which is basically hemodialysis, which is basically at the center where you go for dialysis, and then you have the peritoneal part of it, which is where you do dialysis in your home, usually at night for about 3 to 4 hours, so overnight while you're resting. But it actually causes you to get very, very weak, which gives people a lot of issues with working while having this issue, which we'll explore a little bit. Another thing that makes this a specialty population is understanding the Medicare gap for ESRD. There's a gray area with this gap because Medicaid Part D, which deals with prescriptions, has a lot to do with this, being that if you are diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, you're going to have to get a lot of prescriptions for this, which might cause your overages to go through this. I have a slide for this that I'm prepared to show you guys coming up to show you just how it kind of sort of works. Another thing that makes this population different is that it's just more needy. Having a transplant, which is literally taking an organ from somebody and then matching it up with you in your body if you need it, is very, very intense and is very, very vital for survival for a lot of people with ESRD. Identifying and discussing two main challenges that's specific to this population. One of the challenges is that this population is just growing. It's disproportionately affected in minorities. I didn't get into that. It was just something that I came across in one of the readings that I had seen because a lot of it had to do with income and deal with services provided for them, as well as access to dialysis. Kidney transfer can be difficult in finding a match as well as receiving it. So that was one of the biggest things that I saw was finding the match, kidney transplant, finding the match. The other thing that I saw that was one of the biggest challenges to this was employment while on dialysis. Dialysis is such a huge thing. It's 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. And it's 2 to 3 hours a week. It's very intense. You're sitting on you're hooked up to machines, and you actually lose a lot of energy going through dialysis. So it's one of those things where trying to work, trying to function, trying to maintain your job, maintain your home, your family is very, very difficult. They were the two main things that I saw throughout every single article that I looked through. Challenges continued. Again, the Medicaid gap. The cost to maintain your health through dialysis, through prescription drugs that are needed for dialysis, the burden of Kidney disease is a subjective perception of patients about how their disease interferes with their lives, how they feel frustrated and feel like a burden on their family. Similarly, quality of social interaction was assessed by 3 statements. Did you isolate yourself from around people? That one statement is what led me to put this into my presentation, because when you start to have isolated factors, you start to deal with depression, which is one of the things why I think a social worker is needed in this department, because it's so easy to get down on yourself about needing a kidney or having kidney failure, or having to have people help you, change out your tubes, or have your, someone learn about the dialysis machine within your family to help you in case you should ever need it. How would I, as a social worker, working with this group, prepare to address these type of challenges and needs? Again, it would be the knowledge of learning about ESRD, learning about kidney failure, learning about the transplant list, learning about understanding the prescriptions that are needed for ESRD, possibly getting them waivers for medications if they don't qualify for income-based that way. Post-dialysis needs, in-home nurse, dialysis machines. One of the things, and this is just firsthand knowledge, one of the things that my father-in-law dealt with was when he got diagnosed with ESRD, he also had diabetes, so he wound up losing his foot because of diabetes. He had to have wound care from a nurse that came to change his bandages and rewrap his foot. So that was another thing that was very, very hard for people that have to deal with ESRD. Grief and loss interventions as well, I think, is big, because you don't know if you're ever going to get a transplant if you get that far. You don't know if you're going to be able to make it through all of your dialysis every single time when you need to, or you don't know when your kidneys are going to stop functioning. So preparing yourself and your family is very, very big. So having grief and loss knowledge and the grief and loss skills to work with families of dialysis patients, of ESRD patients, is very, very big for a social worker. What resources would I need as a social worker? Just, again, intense working knowledge of Medicaid and Medicare. We saw that with the Affordable Care Act under President Obama. A lot of things changed with Part D, with the prescriptions. Like I was saying through my readings, a lot of the times you reach a threshold of how much that they'll pay versus how much you have to pay versus how much they can pay. That is a big underlining task for a patient that's going through something to try to understand. I think it's important for the social worker to guide them through this. Understanding grief and loss therapy, again, is not an understatement, but people don't know what tomorrow holds with ESRD. People don't know if they're going to get to the top of the transplant list. That's very, 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 very important. Nursing homes, rehabilitation center, in-home nursing. Again, these are all services that are needed for the patient once post-care. And I also think cognitive theory, because Joseph Walsh stated that cognitive therapy emphasizes each person's natural inclination to make sense of reality and the idea that values can change. So, with that being said, someone with ESRD understands, hey, look, I have kidney failure and I also have renal disease, but that could change if I get on the transplant list. The values of that, me not always staying in a depressive state, could change because of that. One of the things that he also talked about in his book is that you can role play. I think that would be one of the greater strengths for a social worker in this field. Role playing with the client, having them walk through it before they go through it. Like, hey, you're going to be on the transplant list. How do we go over this? We know that you might be on it for a while. You could be on it for a year or two. You might not get a match. Going over that, playing it out with them, letting them go through the emotions of this firsthand before actually going through it is big. March is National Kidney Month. March is DaVita, which is a local company by us that does dialysis. I'm in South Jersey. Helps raise awareness about chronic kidney disease, which is a condition about 1 in every 7 adults have in the United States who end up with ESRD will need dialysis or a kidney transplant. What resources would the client or patient need? Just access to income, access to insurance, prescription medication plan again, in-home nursing is another big one. Again, for just being hooked up for dialysis, whether you do it at the center through hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis, which is in-home. This was the part that I was talking about in 2010, Part D. The benefit of was structured to pay for approximately 75% of the drugs for the first $2,830 spent, and then 95 of the spending exceeded 6,444. So if you're not working and your Medicaid doesn't cover it for elderly people over 65, how are you going to be able to cover your dialysis? This is a huge, 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 huge gap of people. What would I need to distinguish myself from others working in my field outside of basic case management and discharge planning needs? This was a little bit of a harder question for me, but I definitely feel that empathy, unfortunately going through it, but empathy goes a long way in this field. Sticking with the patients, providing that stability goes with them. Transportation, that was another key thing that my father-in-law went through, was trying to get to dialysis. He often didn't have a ride or was too weak to go, so that would be one of the biggest things that I could distinguish myself as a social worker, which would be going the extra mile and transporting them if I needed to. Thank you. These are my references as well.